Just a few short months ago, ASUS announced their first ROG Strix gaming laptop, the light and compact GL502. As you might expect from a Strix branded laptop, the GL502 means business, but surprisingly isn't over the top and certainly isn't overpriced. ASUS has gone with a high quality yet compact 15.6 inch display. In spite of the modest footprint, this thing also packs a real punch with a Core i7 6700HQ at its heart, along with a very capable GeForce GTX 970M, while there's also a 980M model as well. So Core i7 processor, GeForce graphics card, this all sounds really expensive in a gaming laptop, but surprisingly, it really isn't. Over in the US, potential buyers are faced with an asking price of $1,250, down from $1,500 just weeks ago, while us Aussies can snag one for as little as $2,100. So what's the catcher here, you ask? Well, let's find out. The ROG Strix GL502 certainly looks and feels like a quality laptop, so no corners have been cut here. Right away, the brushed aluminium black top cover grabs your attention, as do those nuclear looking neon orange highlights. I can't say this would be my first design choice, but I have to hand it to ASUS, it's anything but boring. Towards the back of the top cover, you'll find a nice looking fluorescent Republic of Gamers emblem in the centre. As much as I do like this lid design, it does come with one drawback. It's a fingerprint magnet. Go anywhere near this thing with oily hands and you'll instantly leave your mark, so neat freaks will want to keep a microfiber cloth handy at all times. Underneath the laptop we find a durable plastic backing which has been given a rough yet nice feeling texture. Again, the fluorescent orange highlights are on display here in the form of 4 very funky looking rubberized feet. Lifting the dual hinge lid reveals this mobile gaming station in all of its black and orange glory. The 15.6 inch display features a fairly large plastic bezel featuring a 1280 by 720 HD webcam in the top middle. The bezel also features a number of rubberized buffers that help avoid marking the screen when the laptop is folded up. Moving to the keyboard area, we find more plastic, this time given the same brush texture as the aluminium lid. Of course, there are more orange highlights here which include another ROG logo as well as some aggressive looking speaker grills. The full-size chiclet style keyboard also features fluorescent orange text which is red backlit for a seriously cool effect. There are 3 brightness levels and of course the backlighting can be disabled entirely to save battery life. The WASD keys are orange with black lettering and well, that just screams gaming laptop, doesn't it? That said, what doesn't scream gaming laptop is the complete lack of dedicated macro keys. Hardcore gamers might frown at the chiclet keyboard, but I have to admit it feels quite good for a laptop keyboard. The keys feature a travel distance of 1.6mm, which is slightly better than your typical chiclet keyboard, while they require 55 grams of pressure to actuate. The keys feel firm with no wobble and provide satisfying feedback when pressed. The keyboard does feature a numpad and the power button has been integrated into the top right hand corner, which I guess is kind of neat. The touchpad, which for the most part is going to be disabled on a gaming laptop, is surprisingly large at 105 by 75mm. It's nice and smooth while offering responsive, jitter-free cursor movement. The clickpad has been integrated into the touchpad itself, and while it does produce nice loud clicks, you can't, for example, click the left button, hold it down, and then click the right button. It's very much a one button at a time deal. Overall, it's a nice looking layout, and despite being a small gaming laptop, the GL502 doesn't seem to give that impression. In total, it measures 388mm long, 266mm deep, and just 22.8mm thick. These modest dimensions mean that it weighs in at just 2.1 kilograms or 4.8 pounds. Getting inside the laptop to make upgrades is relatively easy. The entire bottom panel can be removed once no less than 10 Phillips head screws have been removed. The CPU and GPU are both soldered directly into the main PCB, so there's no chance of upgrading either of these components in the future. I should also note that there's only a single SO-DIMM slot available for expansion. This means the pre-installed 8GB module, which is on the opposite side of the PCB and not easily accessed without dismantling pretty much the entire laptop, is there to stay. Still, this means by adding a relatively inexpensive 8GB DDR4 module, you can double the laptop's memory capacity. Perhaps just as important is the fact that you'll also be enabling dual-channel memory, which will significantly increase the available memory bandwidth. Upgrades can also be made to the storage. The GL502 can be purchased with pre-configured secondary 1TB 7200 RPM hard drive, though this particular model I have doesn't feature any kind of 2.5-inch storage at all. The primary storage device is, however, an M2 SSD, and while the base configuration for this laptop is a 128GB model, the version I have features a 256GB drive. The particular drive in question is the super snappy Samsung SM951 NVMe SSD. When it comes to connectivity, I would say the GL502 is reasonably well equipped. Naturally, there's no connectivity at the front or rear. ASUS has stuck everything towards the back of the left and right sides, which helps neaten things up. Starting with the left side, we find a DC power input, gigabit Ethernet port with clip cover, mini display port, HDMI, USB 3.0 port, and a single USB 3.1 Type-C Gen 2 port which sadly doesn't support Thunderbolt 3. Meanwhile, the right side features a Kensington lock, SD card reader, 2 more USB 3 ports, and a 3.5mm combo audio jack. The USB ports are spread far enough apart that you can access them both simultaneously using wide thumb drives and dongles. The 15.6-inch display for me is the highlight of the GL502. The model I have does feature a 4K display, which I feel is overkill for the GTX 970M GPU, but it does look amazing. For those wondering, you can purchase the laptop with a 1080p screen, and this is what I recommend you get. Something else that I can really appreciate is the matte finish, no highly reflective gloss screen here. The only possible drawback I see is the lack of G-Sync support, as this would have been the perfect pairing with that GeForce GPU. The display features in-plane switching technology and boasts a brightness of 300 nits and a contrast ratio of 900 to 1, both of which are very respectable for a laptop screen. Throwing up a solid black image full screen with the brightness set to max, I couldn't detect any backlight bleeding around the edges. Naturally, there were no dead pixels, though if you are unlucky here, ASUS does offer a zero dead pixel policy. As you'd expect from a quality IPS panel, the colours were rich and the blacks were very black. Overall, I'm very happy with the quality of the display. Complementing the impressive visuals are a pair of small upward-facing speakers that hide behind these orange grills that I spoke of earlier. The speakers are certainly loud enough and the quality is decent, though they do lack bass almost entirely, which does detract from the experience somewhat. That said, most gamers will no doubt be rocking a headset, so given the price point, this certainly isn't a deal breaker. Before we jump into the benchmarks, let's just go over the full spec list as well as the alternate options. As mentioned previously, my model, which is the GL502 VT FI047T, comes loaded with a Core i7-6700HQ, GeForce GTX 970M with 3GB of VRAM, 8GB of DDR4 2133 memory, a 256GB NVMe SSD, and a 15.6-inch 4K IPS display. The 2.5-inch storage options include a 1TB 7200 RPM or 5400 RPM drive, or alternatively a 2TB 5400 RPM drive, none of which are in the model I have. There are also options for a 128GB or 512GB SSD, and some models come with 16GB of memory as standard. There is also the option to purchase the GL502 with a Core i5-6300HQ, though I haven't seen that model on sale yet, at least not down under. Those wanting more GPU horsepower should seek out the 980M model, though we recommend avoiding the Ultra HD 4K version. All models receive wireless networking support via an Intel dual-band wireless AC M2 module capable of theoretical transfer rates of up to 867 megabits per second. The module integrates Bluetooth 4.2 and Wi-Fi as standard. We experienced no connectivity or dropout issues during our testing. The same internal 4-cell 15.2V 4240 mAh lithium-ion battery pack is featured inside all models. The battery can be replaced, but you have to remove the back cover, much like what you do for a memory upgrade. Should you purchase a new battery, I should point out they aren't exactly cheap, starting at around 130 Aussie. Now let's get to the good stuff. How does this thing perform in our tests? I've run a few benchmarks in some of the latest games to give you a good idea of how it stacks up. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of gaming laptops to compare it to, but you can get a good idea by how it performs relative to our desktop GPU results. All tests were run, of course, at 1080p with the maximum in-game quality settings. First up, we've got Call of Duty Black Ops 3, and here the GL502 performed as expected, right on par with the Gigabyte P57W that featured the same GPU. This meant it slightly edged out the desktop GTX 960 and was 7fps behind the R9 380. It was good to see the laptop get over 60fps on max settings. Next up was Rise of the Tomb Raider, and the results were similar for the most part. We saw an average of 56fps with a minimum of 36, and this was a little faster than the R9 380 this time, and exactly on par with the GTX 960. Moving up the food chain, the R9 390 was well ahead on 78fps. The third game tested was the rather demanding Tom Clancy's The Division. Here the GL502 was only good for 35fps with the ultra quality setting, and this was again on par with the P57W and the GTX 960. The R9 380 jumped ahead again, this time by 9fps on average. Keeping the GL502 humming along are a pair of 60mm blower fans, each of which is connected to its own array of copper fins. These copper heatsinks are connected to one another via a pair of flat heat pipes which pass over the CPU and GPU. The GPU VRAM is also covered by a copper heat spreader. It's an elegant solution that seems to work well. Under light load, the fans are very quiet and based on my crude measurements never generated much over 30 decibels. Under load when gaming, the fans do creep up quite a bit, as you might expect, and in the process generate around 40 decibels. Volume-wise, the GL502 is fairly typical for a gaming laptop. I did appreciate how the fans only spin up gradually, so you don't get that annoying fan-surging noise over and over again. Causing the fans to spin up are of course the CPU and GPU, which generate quite a bit of heat under load. Given that this is a very thin gaming laptop, we expected the GL502 to run very hot indeed. When gaming, our temperature gun reported a maximum surface temperature of 62 degrees for the keyboard side and 66 degrees for the bottom. That's actually not bad, though like most gaming laptops, it'll become quite uncomfortable on the lap during the summer season. The 180 watt power brick is big, but not ridiculously big, so you won't have too much trouble transporting it around. In total, there's a little over 3 meters worth of power cord. As for the battery life, ASUS claims 6 hours. With the Wi-Fi constantly active and the screen brightness set to 50%, we consistently got around 5.5 hours out of the GL502, which isn't bad given the hardware inside. Once fully depleted, the battery takes a little over 2 hours to fully recharge. Coming away from this review, I'm extremely pleased with this ROG Strix Lappy. Given the timing isn't great to be checking out a laptop sporting a Maxwell GPU, but at $1,250 US, the GL502 is difficult to pass up. I should point out that the model Newegg is selling doesn't come with the SSD, but that said, it does boast a 1TB hard drive and 16GB of memory, so still an amazing deal. Of course, you can still add an M2 SSD, which opens up a huge number of possibilities. The cheapest GTX 1060 enabled laptops start around $1,550, with most priced much closer to $2,000 US. Frankly, for 1080p gaming, the GTX 970M is still more than capable, and while I really love what the GTX 1060 has to offer mobile gamers, for the money, the GL502 is just too hard to pass up. The truly awesome news being that the GL502 is destined to receive the GTX 1060 as ASUS prepares to release the GL502 VM, while the GL502 VS will sport the GTX 1070. No doubt they'll cost considerably more than the 970M model though. Sadly, down under, we aren't seeing the same discounts as US shoppers, though it has to be said, even at $2,100, the ASUS GL502 is competitive in our market. In Auslan, the GTX 1060 gaming laptops seem to be coming in at around $2,500, with most priced a few $100s more. The only slight hiccup for an otherwise perfect product is the limited 12-month warranty, which comes as standard. Meanwhile, the larger yet similarly priced Gigabyte P57W that I reviewed recently comes with a 2-year warranty, and this has become a standard for most new Gigabyte laptops. The ASUS warranty is top-notch in the sense that it covers even a single dead pixel or accidental damage, the only issue being the duration when compared to a key competitor such as Gigabyte. Keeping pricing and everything else in mind, the ASUS ROG Strix GL502 is without question a keeper. The nuclear orange highlights are fun, the 15.6-inch IPS panel is beautiful, and the performance speaks for itself. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I'm your host Matt as always, and I'll see you guys next time. YouTubers like me depend on your support to continue improving the quality and content of our videos. To support the channel directly, consider becoming a patron to also get access to a heap of cool rewards and exclusive giveaways. Also, don't forget you can check prices and buy the products I looked at in this video through the Amazon links in the video description below. Thank you kindly for supporting me and the Hardware Unboxed channel. It means a lot to me and I really do appreciate it, and in return I'll continue to work as hard as I can to keep producing the content you enjoy.